You have to be a bit nutty to do this job.
Adaptability, that's like the strongest suit you can have as an actor.
You have to have this weird left-right brain balance.
The experience working with Luca Guadagnino is different than the experience working with Greta Gerwig. It was different from the experience working with Christopher Nolan.
You have to stick to your guns. You have to find something that you can do that maybe other people couldn't do.
So the only thing I know how to write about is something that is inside me.
You've got to be an observer of life.
It's a big team. It's not just me that creates this world, it's a huge team.
How you work within your relationship with the people that you're filming with is just everything.
Closest person I will be working with will be a costume designer.
You have to keep your fingers on that emotional pulse as an editor.
As an actor, you want challenges.
And not really ever let it go.
It's kind of important to not feel too safe.
Keep your heart on your sleeve as an actor. That's your instrument.
So you have to be passionate. You have to work really bloody hard.
There's nothing more exciting for me than when someone creates chaos in front of the camera.
Even if you're pretending that you know what you're doing at the beginning, try to pretend properly.
London City, hello.
You might recognise Daniel Kaluuya, accepting the EE Rising Star Award at this year's BAFTAs. His performance as Chris in Get Out captured your minds and hearts, so much so that you chose him as winner of the only publicly voted for BAFTA award brought to you by EE. Now in its 14th year, the Rising Star has also been won by stars like Juno Temple and John Boyega. And it's just one of the great things about our partnership with BAFTA. Another thing our network does to promote great cinema is with the 4G Cinema. Last year, we brought a drive-in cinema experience to some of the UK's most rural communities. We invited residents to watch a film powered by 4G in Stornoway, Scotland, an area of the country that didn't previously get great phone signal. They rolled in for a night at the cinema with a twist, settling down for a classic movie with a castle backdrop. We brought beers, popcorn, and the best 4G service EE can provide. We'll be doing it again this year, so keep your eyes peeled for updates. But for now, enjoy this Guru Live session. You may not be sitting on a hay bale, but you're in good company with BAFTA and EE.
I forgot to say, turn your phones off as well, didn't they? Which is strange, considering who they are. Hello, everybody. I'm Bryony Hanson. I'm actually Director of Film for the British Council, but it's my absolute pleasure to be your host for this evening, for this afternoon. Today. I've got to tell you about some hashtags. We're here, obviously, in partnership with our Guru Live official partner, EE. It's huge grateful thanks to them. Some of you will have been here for the whole weekend, and you'll know that we'd love to hear about your highlights from the weekend, and you can share them with us using the hashtag Guru Live. We're also live streaming this session and lots of the other sessions, so please be aware of that, and I think that might mean please behave yourselves. But it'll be available to watch on the Guru Live website later on today, and on YouTube also later on today. So you can watch it again if you like what you see, and also tell your friends. And you can also watch lots of video and audio from sessions throughout the rest of the weekend. Generally, just follow @BAFTA Guru on Twitter, and check out the Guru website for lots of inspiring stuff, not just from this weekend, but from throughout the whole year. All the interviews you saw there are all on Guru website. So there's lots of content there to entice you. So we all know why we're here. Everyone in this room, and I think possibly quite a lot of people outside of this room, know that Luca Guadagnino was responsible for the tiny film that became a huge hit last year, scooping up awards the world over, not least of which were nominations for 4 BAFTAs, 4 Oscars, and featured on the top 10, everybody's top 10 list, right at the top, my own included. But you may not know, or you'll be less familiar with the fact that he's made 10 feature films in total. 4 of them were documentaries. He's also made 6 shorts, 2 of those were documentaries. And so with that range and the fact that he's made literally one of the films of the decade, I think he's the perfect person to kind of sit in front of you and explain his craft and hear your questions and talk to you, because presumably most of you are at the beginning of your filmmaking journey. So without further ado, I would like to introduce a quick taster of Luca's work. So please, if we could show the show reel just to kind of get you in the mood.
Welcome to the show.
Oh, to see without my eyes. The first time that you kissed me, boundless by the time I cried. I built your walls around me. White noise, what an awful sound. Fumbling by Rogue River, feel my feet above the ground. Hand of God, deliver me. Oh, woe is me. The first time that you touched me. Call me by your name and I'll call you by mine. Cease. Blessed be the mystery of love.
Luca Guadagnino. Thank you so much for giving up your weekend to come and talk to us. We've got about an hour, and I've got lots of questions, but I'm sure you have too, so I'll make sure that we get to those. But shall we just start really simply, start at the beginning? You made the first thing that we know about you is you made a short film. How did you get to that point? Did you know you wanted to be a director? Did you train at college? How did you get to the point of making your first short?
I always wanted to be a director since I experienced movie going. You know, when your kids are asked by adults, what do you want to be? I always said director. I never changed my my point of attention. I've been introduced to cinema at a very early age by my parents. I remember I saw Lawrence of Arabia at the age of 4 in a big fascist movie theater in Ethiopia, where I was growing up. And when I was a bit older, like 8 or 9, I got to get my first camera. It was a Super 8 camera, and I started to make crazy little films. I didn't know anything. I didn't know what I was doing. And I kept making them until I made my first, let's say, publicly screened and recognized piece that was a documentary called Salvatore, un film casalingo fatto a mano, a homemade movie, about a steel worker in the Fiat factory in Turin that I had decided to make because I saw this guy in TV and he was on a newscast and he was screaming at the camera because he wanted equality. And I don't remember how I did it, but I tracked him down. I was like 20 at the time, and I went all the way up from Sicily to Turin, which is a big journey, with a camera that I didn't know how to use it. And then I managed to discover how to be technical and at the same time how to try to tell the story of this young man. And then after that, I kept making other stuff. I made a documentary about the all-important Algerian civil war at the beginning of the 90s, which is a very important thing that they never connect with the tragedy of the integralism that happened 20 years later. It was a movie called Algiers, which was about the diaspora of the intellectual that had to be that were banned from the country, couldn't live there because they were the target of the integralists of Algeria at the times. And we met many people, like many filmmakers, artists, and intellectuals. And then I made this short film called Qui, which was my first venture into film. I shot in 16 millimeters, 65.
That's very big.
Yet to come. And we went to the Taormina Film Festival that was at the time directed by a wonderful historian of cinema and film critic Enrico Ghezzi, which is amazing. So that is my upbringing.
And the film, that was your first drama?
Yeah.
And the kind of things that you were interested in then, the kind of stories that you wanted to tell in a drama, do you think those, can you see now, in the work that you do now, can you recognize the same traits?
Most definitely. I'm a bit boring person. I always run around the same place, I would say. I think the attitude is a little bit different, because when we did the Qui, that's the title of the short film here, I wanted to test myself to see if I could do with film at the age of 22, with a film crew, what my heroes had done. I've been always really fascinated by the cinema of the extreme. One of my favorite films was and is Empire of Senses by Nagisa Oshima. And I've been always like somehow childishly interested in what they call the what can you do in the representation of sexuality, for instance, and how can you stretch that that boundary between the fiction and the reality? What is performance? And I had decided that I wanted to make what Nagisa Oshima had made, to see a couple making love. And it took me a year in trying to, I found my actor immediately. This young man whom I befriended while he was doing a theater school in Rome, and later became one of the most important Italian actors, Claudio Gioè. We immediately became friends, and I said to him, I want to do this, would you do it with me? Sure. And then I had to find the actress, and that was very tough. And it was a very laborious process, because, you know, like you have this young man, I was very skinny, very strange, long hair like this, and you go there and say, there is this short film we want to do, and it's about a sexual act, and it's all explicit, would you do it? And I like, somebody was like, who you are? Like, people are like chasing me. And then I met this woman called Zita Donini, who was underground actress in Bologna. And I don't know how she got the script, which was like 7 pages. And I got this call at my parents' house, because no cell phone at the time. And this woman said, I want to talk to Luca. And yeah, I'm here. I want to do your short film. And I said, what do you mean? Yeah, I read it. I want to do it. Are you sure? Sure, I want to do it. And that's how we did it.
And do you remember feeling confident when you, obviously the casting was enormous, but when you got on set, you got, you know, you...
I had worked with, I had a wonderful producer who is a woman that is one of my mentors. I have many mentors. I have many people that I have to be thankful for making me be doing things that I later did. This woman, Giulia Maura, at the time, she was a post-production coordinator, and she was working with the great Michael Saxton, fantastic post-production supervisor. And I used to come in London when I was very young, and because I met her, she would let me get into the post-productions she was doing at the time. So I remember I passed by Mr. Ken Loach editing, I think Bread and Roses or something like that. So Julia helped me like trying to make this into a proper production. Yeah, like we made it into we had everybody with the production designer, costume designer, sound people, makeup and hair, and of course camera. So it was a proper thing, but it was guerrilla at the same time.
Mm-hmm. And presumably that was massive training. You then went straight on to make your first drama feature, which was The Protagonist.
Yeah.
Which, did you find that a massive step? That's quite unusual, because most people do, you know, short after short. I bet there are people in this room who've done sort of 5, 10, 15 shorts.
You asked me before if I had done some kind of education, like if I did some school, and I didn't. My school was both watching films, going to the movies, watching films on VHS, and watching films on TV. Again, Enrico Ghezzi had this incredible TV show called After Hours that started every day at midnight all the way up until the morning. And because the Italian state TV has an enormous and vast repertoire of film that they acquire, he had the chance to show like the full season of the Ozu films, the full season of the Mizoguchi. So I saw all these films from my 14 years old until now. And that was what I grew up into, and that's my film school. That and reading interviews to filmmakers. So I was kind of like a megalomaniac, which I still am, and guerrilla, like, let's do it.
Mm-hmm. And you went for the protagonist, which I think probably most people in this country won't have seen.
It was at the London Film Festival, though.
Yeah.
We got the most dispiriting review from Time Out.
Sorry about that.
It was so bad.
Let's have a look at the film, and then you can talk about that reaction.
One evening in January 1994, which is today 4.5 years ago, two students from financially privileged backgrounds decided to commit the perfect crime, to select a person unknown to them and to kill them. They travel into London by coach, and a few hours later, at a give-way sign near Bayswater Underground Station, they meet their victim. They get into his car, force him to stop some way ahead, and they kill him. After the crime, they return to their lives as students. Some 10 months later, they're convicted for life in prison. We've come together to make this film about our curiosity about this case. For legal reasons, we are not allowed to mention the names of the killers, but we will be clear about the name of the victim, Mohammed El Sayed.
I haven't seen this since then.
Which is nearly 20 years ago.
Yes.
So you made a sort of odd, like drama doc hybrid there.
There was a movie by Al Pacino called Looking for Richard, a movie directed by Al Pacino, which was fantastic. And of course, documentary for me is a big thing. It is something that probably I recognize as the most evolved and sophisticated mean of telling a story in cinema. So I was really interested in the fracture between what is the representation of reality in a documentary and what is the using the mean of documentary in a sort of fictionalized way. That's why we created a movie that, of course, is quite unsuccessful in the aims, but that wanted to see these boundaries, these blurred lines intertwine.
And quite unsuccessful. Did you feel that at the time? Or did you just feel it when you read your Time Out review?
Like, I think that I'm happy to be grown up because, you know, when you do a clipping of a hedge, you take off the superfluous, and I think that I may be thankful to my energy when I was younger of doing things, but at the same time, I am glad that some sort of bombastic attitude has gone. And I think the protagonist kind of probably may have suffered of a sense of we can do whatever we want with cinema. And I'm not talking literally and necessarily about the cinematic failure of it, but because of what we just saw in this scene. By the way, in the two pans you see many people that are still working with me, and that they are part of my life. We were investigating a murder case that was quite infamous in
that was a real
UK,
murder
real. Case. So I don't know. I'm a little bit wary of the implications of making a sort of cerebral reflection on cinema and representation using a real murder case.
Do you mean ethically?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I do believe in ethics when you come to making films. Probably the Luca of 20 past years ago thought it was an ethical decision to make the movie, but I'm not sure. now.
And did you have anybody, was this one a guerrilla one as well, or did you have, you know, financiers and
No, it was
breathing down your neck?
It was financed by a guy called Massimo Villar, whom I convinced because my short film, was kind of a sort of like when we showed to Taormina, it was made the headlines. And then Tilda had made Female Perversions after she had made Orlando, I mean, all the great Germans, but Orlando in Italy and Female Perversions were kind of hot titles. So I said to my producer that I had written something for Tilda that was the story of this crew investigating this case, and he was okay. He had a great, vast library of titles that made his fortune. So he put his own money in that.
And talk about a little bit more about the relationship with Tilda, because obviously that was the first and it's gone on and on. What was it that you saw in her? Actually, I'm glad you mentioned Female Perversions. I think of Female Perversions every day when I put perfume on, because I walk into it.
Oh, yes.
As she did in that film. Sorry, that's just me.
True. That's a beautiful film.
Yeah.
That's a beautiful film.
But what was it that you found in her?
Well, I met Tilda through courtesy of Derek Jarman when I saw Caravaggio. I think I was 15 when I saw that. It was 86. I saw it in a movie theater in Palermo, all alone. And I was immediately captivated by her. There was something about her that felt deeply connected in me. And I kept following her wonderful path through Jarman's film. And then I saw Orlando. When I saw Orlando, I was a veteran. Like, I knew everything about Tilda to date. Like, I've seen everything she had done then. It wasn't my first movie of Tilda, you know? And then I decided that I wanted to do something with her. I loved her voice very much. And then I wrote this short film called The Penny Arcade Peep Show, which was a compilation of excerpts from William Burroughs' The Wild Boys. And I had this idea, again, kind of random, of making this short film about the exploration of, in detail, in macro lenses, exploration of the body of a man with this voice of a woman acting the Burroughs catapholding kind of technique. And I sent the script to her agent, with whom I'm very dear friend since then, or despite then. And I didn't have any reply. And then one day I read on a newspaper that there was a season of alternative, avant-garde, contemporary British cinema at the Italian and Roman Museum, and the Tilda was presenting Isaac Julian. She was introducing an Isaac Julian film. So I went there and I approached her, and we started to talk, and she was great because she said to me, I can't talk to you now, but if you call me at my hotel, and she gave me the name of the hotel, maybe tomorrow we can see each other if you have free time. And she stuck to her word, which tells you, I mean, there must be filmmakers here and people who are starting filmmaking.
Which tells you what not to do.
No, it tells you, do this. Do this.
But not here.
Why not?
What did she? You've gone on and worked with her four times since then.
More
than that.
We did many things. I mean, we started to dream of things and to do things. We did The Protagonists. We did. I made a portrait of her called The Love Factory. We did I Am Love. We did on like A Different Life and A Different Job many commercials together. We did The Biggest Splash. And we did Suspiria.
And how much has your relationship as a director of her as an actor changed? I mean, how much do you now have a shorthand? How anxious were you at the beginning about telling the great Tilda what to do?
Well, I mean, I don't think that neither Tilda has that attitude to put you in a situation in which you have to see at her from a pedestal. Neither I have that kind of, I'm kind of practical. So, like, you have to understand you have to learn how to talk to people. And with Tilda, we learned immediately that we love to talk to each other. So it's a conversation that is ongoing.
And you, after that experience, which presumably, did that leave you bruised, or were you able to just move on?
Well, because of my love for the cinema of the extreme, and because of my knowledge of how things has gone through the episodes of careers of other filmmakers, I kind of, I never been kind of interested in success for the sake of it, you know? Like films that I adore, they came out and they were destroyed. I mean, famously L'Avventura by Antonioni, or I don't know, Detective by Jean-Luc Godard. Films that were really, really considered horrible and destroyed and savaged, and they were failures, now are in the canon of cinema itself. So I wasn't really impressed by success as much as I wasn't impressed by failure. I was impressed by things that I was happy about. When we presented the protagonists, we were at the Venice Film Festival, and they gave us the Sala Grande, which is the big theater. It was a 2:00 screening, and the movie finishes, and basically, out of 1,000 people, 700 people started to whistle and boo the movie. And we were there, at the center. What can you do? It was an interesting experience.
You can go on from there.
Yeah.
You went back immediately afterwards.
I'm vaccinated, as you say.
Yeah, there you go. You went back, and you went back into shorts. You did shorts, documentaries. You didn't try another drama for a while.
Well, The Protagonist was a kind of borderline documentary. Yeah. I kept doing what I wanted to do. And I'm still doing that. That's my method of work. I do things that I like to do. So I remember after The Protagonists, I did another documentary, which was Mundo Civilizado, about kids, about the generation of kids at the beginning of the 90s, at the beginning of the 2000s, sorry, in the south of Italy, in this place called Catania, where this musical scene was very important. I did a documentary about a chef called Paolo Masieri, called Cuoco Contadino, Cook Peasant. I kept doing things that I liked. Then I was approached to do a movie called Melissa P., which was an idea of a producer who was an actress, Francesca Neri. She had acquired the rights of this book called 100 Hits of Brush Before Going to 100 Strokes of Brush Before Going to Sleep by Melissa Panarello, which was supposedly a sort of real-life notebook about her sexual experience in growing up. And Francesca had this intuition that I could be interested in doing that. And I was. And that was going to every film school, every university you could possibly go, because I went from doing very bizarre, independently made, tiny budgeted proto-documentary into making a movie for Sony International from a book that sold 2 million copies. And it was, like I always felt that I had the power of holding my fate in my hands and to do exactly what I wanted. And yet, when you deal with a movie like that, that's not exactly what happens. And so probably despite the fact that I feel that The Protagonist is a movie that is, let's say, half-baked, I think the Melissa P. is the movie that I am sad about as a feature, because I think that the things we wanted to do, me, my editor, Walter, who have been working in since 25 years now, was the movie that we were not being given the chance to make.
That's interesting, because I really enjoyed it, but...
Thank you.
Anyway, but there's interesting things about that compared with the work that you've done more recently, particularly in relation to the working with young actors, or getting young actors to do explicit things, to really kind of make...
Maria Valverde is incredible. She's an amazing actress, so I'm happy about having worked with her. But there were many things that happened during the process of filming the movie. First of all, you work with a producer who is an actress, and if she or he is not really a producer, not because they are actors, but because the attitude is not that of a producer, you are in trouble, because a producer is there, for me, myself being a producer, to make sure that the vision of the director is integral. Once you choose to work with a director, the movie is of the director, and there is no way in which. that can be diverted from. But in that case, unfortunately, Francesca wasn't there to protect me. And I remember I was working with this fantastic gentleman called Gareth Wigan. Gareth was a legendary executive in Hollywood. It was at Fox, then he made the Lad Company, and then he moved to Sony. He's responsible for having greenlit Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon. I mean, fantastic, legendary person. And so he and I had a great relationship, really wonderful. It was the people in the middle who kind of disconnected themselves from our process. And so I was kind of in a situation in which I remember, and I'm saying that because I'm sure there are filmmakers here, I was there and I remember that there was somebody from Sony put there to see what I was doing. And, you know, I'm very decisive and I don't believe in coverage as a filmmaker. You know, like I know that when I have something that I think is enough point of view for the scene, let's move on. And I remember with this giant, kind person who was telling me, now, can you revert the camera to the other side? And, you know, like, and so we had going through coverage. That was one part of the story that made me like uncomfortable, because then when you go to the editorial room, you can't deny the fact that you have that other side. Mm-hmm. And so the sequence is suddenly perverted, at least the sequence I had in my mind. And the integrity of the what we had in mind suddenly becomes, let's say, averaged. Mm-hmm. And then when we were the first Italian movie that, because it was Italian but financed by Sony, that got a test screening. Never happened in the Italian industry, never. So they made a test screening of the movie, and it was the closest to what I wanted, yet perverted by this idea of coverage. But the soundtrack we put together for the movie was, because it was about teenagers and sexuality, mm-hmm. Me and my editor decided that we were going to make this movie as a sort of compilation of the sound of the generation we were describing. So it was like 45 songs of pop music from all over the world that could resonate with the emotion of these kids. And that was quite brilliant. So we made this test screening in Rome. Remember, it's about a young girl coming of age sexually and how she empowers herself not to become the tool of pleasure for men, which is something quite disturbing for the average Italian identity. Particularly on a night out at the movies, because you are watching this together. So, you know, it's tricky when you see sexuality on screen with other people beside you. Yeah. Because, what do you do? But at least British people are like prudish and like, But Italians becomes hypocritically scandalized. So there was a riot in the movie theater after the screening. And, you know, there was a scene in the movie that I loved, because Melissa has been abused by the beau of the school and his best friend. And she decides that the vengeance will be to sexually ridicule them. So she goes to them, and then she basically upside down the situation completely for her own pleasure. And that scene made us like roaring audience, like they hated it. And so the outcome was that there was what I like in film. There was like a clash. Mm-hmm. But Sony was like suddenly terrified by that. And they also thought, okay, we have to cut the nails of this empowerment of Melissa, make her be like seeking a sense of, let's say, modesty. At the end, she hugs the mother on the grave of the grandmother. In my ending, she does that, but while she's hugging the mother, she sees up and she sees the guy she had fucked with in the museum an hour before, and they look at each other. That was my ending. They hated that. We had to cut that, and she had to hug the mother with the puppy. And the soundtrack, they said, oh, there is not a glue, something that glues the emotion, which I always despise in cinema, the idea that the soundtrack is, let's say, Mickey Mousing the emotion of an audience. It's the worst way you can use music in film. Awful. But they wanted that. So they took off everything I put in the movie, and they hired a soundtrack, a composer, And he made the soundtrack. I didn't want to know anything about it. But the movie made 7 million euros at the box office in Italy. And they thought it was going to be a catastrophe. So
I don't know why anyone ever makes a film, really. So you went. Could you have done anything differently? I mean, knowing that Sony were putting up the money and that you were you were a puppet.
Well, after that, I said to myself, I will never put myself again, ever, in that situation, ever. Life is too short. I can cook. I can take care of a house. I can maybe consult somebody on the way they can dress. You know, I can be a personal shopper. I can make a living out of cinema. If I do movies, I have to be in absolute charge and control. Otherwise, I do other jobs like this.
Very good. Okay, so the next one, you really were in charge. This time, Love.
I said to myself, it's not going to happen again. And then I said to myself, I'm going to be a producer. I'm going to produce my own films because I know what I want and I know how a movie is made.
And this one had a really different kind of development process.
You mean I Am Love?
Yeah, with Tilda and working from John Adams' music.
Well, that's what happens is that when I did Love Factory, which basically is Tilda's beautiful thread of thought. She's so wonderful in the way she thinks and the way she verbalizes her thoughts. And this movie was like a close-up of her, speaking for half an hour, almost without cuts, about her idea of love, which was so deeply inspiring to me that I remember I had shot that interview in her bedroom in the Hotel Majestic in Cannes when she was in the jury of the short films. And on the way back, I started to think of films that I love, like the Rossellini Bergman films, like Europa 51 or Fear, or, of course, the greatest film of all time, that is Voyage to Italy. And I started to think that I always loved a movie about, with at its center a woman, and to see the turmoil of a woman closely. So it's very deeply inspired by Tilda's words. I got into this kind of very rare situation in which I wanted to write, because it's a process. Writing for me, it's kind of laborious. It takes me a lot of time. And I remember I wrote in like an afternoon the story of I Am Love, which is not the most original, you know, like a woman falls in love with the best friend of the son. It's like a canon of melodrama. And I told Tilda that I had written that and that it was for her. And from 2002, which is when we shot The Love Factory, and I wrote this outline. It took us a few years to find a script that I was happy with. I tried to work with a writer I wasn't happy with. I worked with another writer, and then I worked with Walter Fasano, my editor. And we get to a place in which we love the script, and then we tried to put together the movie. And so it took. I remember we asked for public money from Italy, and then we thought we were getting the funds, and then we didn't. It was 2006, so we were supposed to shoot in 2007, and then we were delayed by a year, and that's when we shot the movie in April 2008.
And can you talk a little bit about the relationship between the music?
Well, the music is that. So I wrote the story, and in the meantime, I did Melissa P. Mm-hmm. And when I did Melissa P, the wonderful Gareth Wigan. I was in Madrid. We were making post-production in Madrid. It was my birthday, 10th of August. And he gave me this beautiful box of CDs as a gift. Mm-hmm. And among the CDs that he gave me, there was one, which was Naive and Sentimental Music by John Adams. And I loved the title, but I didn't know anything about John Adams. Again, it was August 2005. So I went home, I put the CD, and the first note, which is a suspended note, dun, 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 immediately got me in. And I remember, I will never forget that I listened to the thing, the symphony. It's three movements, and it's, I think, 45 minutes. And I listened it again, and I listened it again, and I listened it again. And I became addicted. And I thought that that was the sound, that was the musical voice for I Am Love. And I started to, I wanted to become a scholar of John Adams. I started to study, to find music from him. I even found that there were concerts or operas, so I went all over Europe to see his repertoire as much as I could. I remember a not so great Nixon in China, but so great music in Verona. That was a really pivotal experience. And so when we shot the film, I was totally adamant to have John Adams. And because the experience of Melissa with the music was so catastrophic, I said to everybody, either him or no music in the film. So we shot, I don't know who has seen I Am Love, but there is a scene in which Emma Recchi, played by Tilda, is in this village on the seaside, and she sees the object of her desires, this young man. She starts to follow him, and in that sequence, I always thought it was Lollapalooza that I wanted to use. And I remember we had this gigantic 90s kind of, like rapper, big, how do you say, CD with speakers. And I remember we were putting the music and shooting with this music out loud through the city of Sanremo. It was great.
Clearly.
But then what happened is that we edited the movie, and we only used John Adams. We made the inquiry to Non-Such Records, and they come back to us and say, yes, it's like $500,000. And we're like, oh my God, what do we do now? So Tilda found the email for Mr. Adams, which, don't forget, like, we are kind of clowns. They are serious people, like John Adams is a serious artist. We are imposters. I mean, that is like Pulitzer Award winner, but also like he's in the world of high art, even if he, as an artist, is not into the academic. It's like, yet, I mean, it's John Adams. And so Tilda writes this beautiful email to John Adams, and he replies back, I'm coming to London shortly because I have Dr. Atomic. If you and your director wants to come and see the opera, we will be so happy. And I'm happy to see the film if you want to show me the film. And so it was here in London, and we organized a screening. Remember, no music by John Adams. If he says no, it's a disaster. And before his screening, we have another screening, because we wanted to sell the film at the time to a company to sell the film. So we show it to Wild Bunch. The guy was Alain de la Matta, I remember, and there was a friend of his, and or someone from the company. So I showed the movie to them in the morning, but my mind was all about John Adams is coming at 3 o'clock. So again, I was megalomaniac and guerrilla in that moment. And they come off the movie and they say, I'm so sorry for you. It's bad. We don't want it. It's bad. And I don't know what can you do to save the situation, because there is nothing you can do. And I say, what do you mean? I say, clearly the movie is bound to be an Italian niche thing, despite your effort to work with Tilda. And you should make the movie about the son, because, nobody cares about Emma in the role, as a lead. I don't know if you could re-edit everything to make the thing about the boy. Do you have more footage? And I say, okay, bye-bye. And John Adams come in, and we show the movie to John Adams, and Tilda and I made the mistake to sit through the screen with him. And I'm here with Tilda, and he's there. It's 2 hours, the movie, so it's the most excruciating 2 hours of my life. And we're holding hands, bleeding, because we're squeezing the hands. And the end of the film is when Emma comes back home after the funeral of the son, and she takes off all the clothes of her past life. She grabs nothing and leaves. And the entire scene is is edited through the I think second movement of Harmon Lear, one of the greatest symphonies of Adams. But you know, when you edit with music, you have other sounds, you have to maybe take off one part of the score and cut it together. You have to do things that, again, belongs to imposters, not to John Adams. So I was like, oh my God, he's gonna hate it. And I see him from the back doing this. And I say, Tilda, we are fucked. He's hating it. And we were like, yeah. And then she said, what do we do? I said, I don't know. And it was like this. It was like, no. And the movie ends, it ends like that. Then there are the titles. Then the lights goes up. He turns and he says, fantastic. He was conducting the music in his head. He was giving the tempo to the music.
Yeah.
Amazing.
That's amazing. Okay. Whew. Lie down now.
And then he said to us something that was amazing. He said, I'll help you getting the rights of the music. I'm proud to be here with you guys, but you have to put, my condition is that you put on the main credits music by John Adams. And I fainted because, of course, music by John Adams.
That's what you wanted. That's amazing. It's a great story. The film is, I have read subsequently that the film is seen as now as a kind of triptych of films. The Desire collection, which apparently is this, Bigger Splash, and Call Me By Your Name.
Because...
Is that something that critics have said afterwards?
No. That was something stupid that I said, because... because the truth is that when you finish a movie, you are not finished. You have to keep going. You have to release the movie. You have to talk about the movie. So I did I Am Love, and I did Big Splash, and then I did Call Me By Your Name. All these movies, like I Am Love, we really pursued it, and we made it happen. Mm-hmm. Big Splash was something that happened because my dear friend Ron Halpern from Studio Canal, and he came to me and said, we want to remake La Piscine by Jacques Deray, a movie that I don't like. And then I said, okay, but I started to raise the bar of what I wanted. I want to produce, okay. I want to shoot in Pantelleria, okay. I want to change the title, sure. I couldn't say no, I said yes. But I was kind of like, am I going to make another movie about rich people by the pool?
Yes.
And then I did a third about rich people around the little pool. So when I had to write the notes for the Sundance Film Festival on Call Me By Your Name, the director's notes, I thought, okay, either this is the rich people around the pool trilogy, or is the trilogy about desire, and I opted for that.
Perfect. Can you just talk a little bit about the relationship between when you make a film which is out of your head?
But I'm not rich, I don't have a pool.
You will soon. Movies that's come out of your head and something that's based on source material, either a novel or
a movie,
or an essay in the situation of Suspiria, or another movie. How much do you go back and look at the original material, and how much do you put it to one side and write your own piece or direct your own piece?
With Melissa P, I read it once. Actually, I read it half. I'm talking like as if we are like in a little house with friends, but I think this is going to be telecast.
Sorry about it.
I feel home here. I Am Love is original material. Big Splash, I'd seen the movie before, and then I went through the movie with my writer, the wonderful David Kajanek, in LA. And we put the CD in the recorder, in the player, and I think there was a cable that wasn't connected, so there was the images, but they weren't the sound, and so we got bored, and so we basically never saw it again. And in Suspiria, it's a different story, because I mean Suspiria is deeply rooted in my imagery, and I think I saw the movie like 100 times. I haven't seen it after I started to work on the script, but I know the movie by frame.
Let's have a look at one more quick clip before we see the Suspiria trailer. We're going to look at the third Rich People Round a Pool movie that you've made, which is Call Me By Your Name. Let's have a very quick look at that clip, please.
Oliver! Oh, darling, when are you coming back?
I wish I was.
You caught us in the process of choosing the new you for next summer.
And guess what? He's a she.
Oh, nice. Well, speaking of shoes, I'm calling to tell you guys I got engaged.
Wonderful!
Mazel tov!
Congratulations, Oliver. Listen, we'll leave you. We'll let you speak to Elliot.
Happy Hanukkah!
Happy Hanukkah!
Happy Hanukkah!
Bye, sweetheart.
They know about us.
I figured.
How?
Well, from the way your dad spoke to me, he made me feel like I was a part of the family. Almost like a son-in-law. You're so lucky. My father would have carted me off to a correctional facility.
Elio.
I remember everything.
Oh, it just kills me. I find it quite hard to talk after that, but the film has a number of set pieces. That's one of them. You know, the kind of the sofa conversation with the father. Tell us about what those look like on the page and how much, you know, how much of that is on the page, how much of that is the performers, and how much of that is you bringing what you put into those situations.
Well, I met Bernardo Bertolucci at the 1996 because he came to the university that I was attending in Rome to do something like that. Mm-hmm. And so I approached him and I wanted to talk to him, and he said, no, I mean, I can't talk now, but my number is on the phone book, call me. And I called him. And he called me back because he wasn't home. So I went to see him editing Little Buddha. And I was talking to him about the script for the protagonist that I was already starting thinking about. And I asked him if I could send it to him to get him his advice. And he said to me in this beautiful, paradoxical way, I never read scripts, even mine. And at the time, I thought it was a way of being dismissive and not committal. But I think it was, first of all, he was correct, right, and he was accurate. When you do a movie, the scripts encompasses many functions. Most of these functions are brutal and technical. To create a schedule, to create a budget, to attract an actor or an actress, to convince someone to put money in it. All these are totally devoid of the essence of the script as a narrative tool. As a narrative tool, the director has the need to learn it very deeply. But at the same time, to disenfranchise herself or himself from it, to kind of become autonomous from it. Because otherwise, you risk the great danger of making injustice to a good script, which is to make it literal. But as Rossellini said, you have to leave the door of reality open on set. So I would say the outcome of any movies I make, and I think this is right for any filmmakers, is that there is a process of writing that is triple. You write the script, you rewrite this film in shooting it, and in particular in your relationship with your performers. and with the actual phenomenology of the place we are shooting the movie. And then eventually, you have the last process of writing, which is the editing, which is possibly, in terms of its closeness to the concept of the language of cinema, is the most important. So I think that a scene like that, I'm very proud of that scene, and Mr. Perlman wears my jumper. I'm proud of it because the crystal purity of Asimon's book, which for Call Me By Your Name is really like Mount Rushmore of our movie. It's so a setting stone. It is really represented by, for me, these performers. You know, like when you see the last glance between Mr. Perlman and Mrs. Perlman, the way in which, when she hangs the phone, she has a little sigh, and then she goes down with the gaze, and then looks up to the husband, because she knows that Oliver is going to break the heart of her son. That moment, that's unwritable. That is only being
What did
something
the
that can.
script say? What did James Ivory's script say?
It said probably that I don't remember, but I do remember that energy between Amira and Michael very much, and I do remember the wisdom of our Jean-Pierre Laforce, which is the great sound designer and mixer, and Walter Fasano, the editor, that the way in which they overlap the conversation from one room to the other, and how the idea that he's listening to them talking to him, like all this like mise en abîme of listening play, that's completely technical, like we created in post-production, but it's seamless.
I feel we could talk for another day about this particular, or that scene, let alone that movie. But let's get a little bit quickly up to date. We're just going to have a tiny trailer from Suspiria, just to get you all in the mood for the London Film Festival screening. Bring it on. Okay, I've had long enough. It is your turn. Pop your hands up nice and high, and I think we have mics on both sides. Question at the back. Sorry to make you run up. And the next one after that. Don't be shy, people. He's only got another 10 minutes. There. Okay, so then down here.
Hi. Do you do much storyboards or extensive shot lists taken to the set, or do you kind of just feel it out on the day?
Neither one nor the other. I do diagrams maybe sometimes, maybe for myself, sometimes for my DP or the position. But the thing I learned it by watching a great documentary on the long process of the making of the last Bergman films, Fanny and Alexander. In this beautiful documentary, that it's in the Criterion Collection box set with the TV version and the cinema version, which I urge everybody to go and see, you see Bergman and his process, which is something that intuitively I always felt like going for. But in a way, I kind of was like shy. I thought like, oh, you can't show yourself, like Ridley Scott, who said at the end what he said. You have to pretend. You don't have the answers. You never have the answers. You may be earnest and look for answers in the process with your collaborators, or you can pretend. But everybody has to know that a director who comes on set with all the answers is a bad director. So what happens with me is that a very important thing is that you have to have all the elements very well prepared, but then you have to listen for the scene. So you first start with how the scene works in terms of the dynamic of the characters on screen. And only after that is really, really rooted, then with your DP, you look for the only place that the camera should be. And that happens to be what I do for a living.
Down here.
Thank you. So I was fortunate enough to meet Andre Ackerman a couple of months ago, and he was talking to me about Call Me By Your Name and the limitations and the ambiguities and the falling off points when he came to sort of telling his story through his characters. And I wondered, following on from Bryony's question a bit, is that something that you spoke to him about? Did you have hard limits about what you could do and how you could tell the story through your characters on screen, or points of ambiguity or falling off points that you discussed with Andre?
I met Andre a year and a half before with James. That was when James was supposed to direct the film. We had a lovely lunch. Andre is an exquisite person, full of beautiful tales. He speaks every languages, beautiful Italian. And he basically said, go and do your movie. Okay, what can I tell you? He didn't say anything. He didn't ask for anything. We didn't spoke about it at all. Then, when we were shooting, he promised to come on set. And he came with his wife, Susan, and we just gave him a suit, and he went on being on film, because he's one of the two friends who come to visit them. The other one is the producer, Peter Spears. That's my most in-depth conversation I had with him on the characters. Like, you should drink the champagne like that. I think there was the gentlewoman with the tank top over there.
Oh, okay. There and then up there.
Just wondered if you could speak on the comment that you made earlier, where you said you have to leave the door open to reality on set and the danger of not interpreting things literally, which I think is fascinating, because I think there can often be, especially if you're a young writer or director, producers can be worried unless you interpret things literally. And so when you said you must leave the door open to reality on set, what did you mean by that?
I can make one example that is related to that, for instance, like which is the scene in which, in Call Me By Your Name, Oliver and Elio speak for the first time about what's going on between the two of them in front of the monument to the fall victims of the World War the First. That scene was like 6 or 7 pages dialogue intended to highlight the back and forth between the two characters through the words. So as in terms of storytelling, it was quite precisely laid out to be a conversation piece between those two. Could have happened on a bench in like this. And yet, when we arrived there on the set, which I knew already because I had scouted, of course, but suddenly everything was brought to the 80s. So I started to see that there was a dynamic between the castle on the background, the little bar on the left side where maybe Oliver could go and buy the cigarettes, the few cars parked, the monument, the church, the bus, all these in a way urged the scene to change radically. And Army said, why don't we do it in one take? Which was a beautiful and was a beautiful comment. And I said, okay. So I changed the idea that was supposed to be a conversation piece into a dance. That's why my first dance scene in a movie. They dance around each other through the space, and the space is helping them to be frank and earnest to one another. So we really made this dance from this big square, because I think all the world loves lovers, and all the world loves the people in love. So everything is participating to that moment with them. And then we said, okay, let's shoot. And we had no trucks, because it was a tiny movie, that could carry us from this side of the square all the way here. So we had to wait from Milan to get the trucks. So we spent like 2.5 hours just waiting. So it's precious time. And yet that was fantastic. And when we put all the trucks on the floor and we could only shoot 2 or 3 times, the tension of it, the investment, the excitement from Army and Timothy was so strong that I think the scene came out because of all this reality being allowed to be.
Go to the top.
You talked a little bit earlier about some of the ways in which some of your early projects maybe didn't land in the way you might have hoped in terms of the reception from audiences and so forth. And now obviously you've had some terrific success. And actually now people look back at those early films and think, well, they were great. Why didn't people respond better to them at the time? But I wonder, over the course of your journey, has your approach to telling stories evolved? Or to put it another way, what do you think you've learned over the course of your career that would be the key things you might be able to impart to us as sort of filmmakers maybe embarking in that journey of directing?
I think simplicity, possibly, maybe. Economy of means and economy of expression, I think it's something really valuable. For all my love for great Baroque filmmaker, like Brian De Palma. But yet also Brian De Palma is very he's very simple in his approach, from his perspective, of course. What I'm trying to say is that you don't need much when you have a great performers and an environment that is a character in itself. The scene we saw of Call Me By Your Name, it is an example. It is like 2 shots, and what happens is what happens in the dynamic on screen more than anything else. Yeah.
Down here.
Sufjan Stevens is known for being a bit inaccessible and a bit of a recluse. So I was wondering how you convinced him to be involved in Call Me By Your Name, and how many notes or directions you gave to him to make the original songs for the soundtrack.
I mean, the question should be asked to Sufjan, of course, because for me to answer that question is quite presumptuous. I can tell you that the process to approach him was not fast, that my wonderful music supervisor, Robin Erdang, who helped me doing the score for A Bigger Splash, which was a feat. I mean, it was quite ambitious soundtrack, was instrumental in making me have my first conversation with Sufjan. But as all the great artists, Sufjan is a person that has a very, very deep capacity of listening. I think he was interested in the book and in the script, probably, and in our conversations. It was quite, I mean, once we spoke, it was quite smooth. He was very clear in what he didn't want to do for me, because I wanted him to be a narrator in the movie. I had this crazy idea that there was a narrator in the film who was going like, in 1983, literally. And then I wanted to have like a intermission. I wanted to have like the story, like the second before they kiss, I wanted to stop the film and I wanted Sufjan to get into the screen and say, now I'm gonna sing a song. And he was going to say, I'm serious. And he said, no way. And I'm glad he said no way. Not because he wouldn't be great on screen, he's fantastic, but because, it was something that was going against the concept of simplicity. It was like there was a great Mario Monicelli, one of the greatest, in an interview, in a public confrontation with Nanni Moretti, who was younger. It was like Nanni when he was the second feature, and he was like a wunderkid. And he thought that this idea that people in their youth who are successful, they think they have to kill the fathers, which I don't believe. I think talk to the fathers. And Nanni was saying to Monicelli, you are old and you are making the same movies. And Monicelli said, you know what? I like your movies, but I would like them more if you just move off the screen for a moment. Let me see the film. And I think that in that case, the thing of Sufjan was like me trying to be formalistic and self-conscious about the means of narration, and also having Sufjan being on screen, which is why I wanted that. Because in the great Something Wild, Jonathan Demme opens and ends his masterpiece with the sister Carol East singing a song. And I always wanted to make homage to that, but it was uneven. And I think Sufjan was smart. He said no. But then I wanted a song, and he gave me 3. So
Sounds like you're building up to make a musical.
I want to make a musical, big time.
Go on.
I don't know. I'd like to do it. I really like to make. I mean, musicals are some of my favorite films ever. Meet Me in St. Louis, amazing. All That Jazz, amazing. Showgirls, amazing. It's a masterpiece.
Oh, no. Okay, we've got time for one final
Jacques
question.
Rivette, who was a great filmmaker but also a great scholar of cinema, in this incredible interview, he said that Meet Me in St. Louis is a good movie, but not a great movie, because Minnelli, for him, suffers from a sense of showmanship. And Showgirls is a masterpiece because it's the real vision of Las Vegas.
Okay, make it a good one. Up there.
Up there? Yeah.
Hang on, it's coming to you.
Hi, thank you so much for speaking. This has been really wonderful. I was just wondering, you've talked a little bit about working with actors that you've sort of had over the course of your career, and I was just wondering, when you say that you sort of meet somebody, or you met Tilda, I know is a special case, but you meet somebody and you just sort of see something about them that you want to work with. What does that look like? Could you pinpoint it? And sort of what does it look like to work with other actors? What is your process working with actors like?
I think it's intuitive, probably, I guess. I don't know. Because I make you an example. I was scouting for Call Me in the fields. We were trying to see what field is good. These were all the same, but anyway. And there was this lady passing past us with a bike, which was very, I was drawn to her. Like, I look at her like, oh my God. And I said to my casting director, executive producer Stella, run, get her. And she ran after this lady, and she's Mafalda in the film. And she plays also one of the great witches in Suspiria. I know that I want to work with her over and over again. It is intuition, I guess.
And she wasn't an actor?
Oh, no. Wasn't an actor, no. She wasn't an actor. No.
Okay, that's amazing. This has been the most wonderful way to spend a Sunday afternoon. Thank you so much.
I mean, I'm happy.
Ladies and gentlemen, Luca Guadagnino. Thank you so much.
That's great. I'm so happy we did it.